Okay, so I'll ask some questions about your work and career. What did you do for a living?
What did I do for a living? Well, I started out as on an engineering training program at GE, which was a series of 3-month assignments in different places for almost 2 years.
Okay. So 8 assignments?
3-month assignments,
Over the 2 years,
it was called the
8 in
engineering
total?
training program. I started in Schenectady, and I went to Bloomfield, New Jersey. I was in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and in Syracuse. I think that's my 4 assignments. And then on one of while I was working in Syracuse, at the television department there, I was working for it was the radar group, doing testing. It was a very boring job. And I really wasn't very happy with it, but that's what it was. And we went on a tour of the television department. They took the test engineers, must have probably 15 or 20 of us. And at the end, one of the man who took us on the tour said that they were looking for 3 test engineers to take supervisory jobs in the television department. They had never had college-trained foremen on the floor. And it would be a 3-month assignment, running an assembly line. And I figured I didn't have anything to lose. I put my hand up, and 2 other fellows joined me. And so a week or so later, we were at the TV department. I was a foreman of a new final assembly line. They just had revamped the whole, this was television, whole assembly factory. I didn't know, I had a very good boss who was he was a Syracuse University graduate. He was the general foreman. I didn't know the personnel department from the payroll department. I didn't know nothing. All I did was, here's your line, here are your people, and you run this line every day from 7 to 3:30 every morning, every day. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Made a lot of mistakes, but I loved being with the people. And I realized that most of the engineers that I was on a training program with were a lot smarter than me. And I figured, maybe engineering wasn't my career. So towards the end of my 3 months, they asked me if I was interested in staying on, and I said, absolutely. So I stayed there for, I don't remember now, close to a year, maybe not. And then another GE training program came up, which was called the manufacturing training program, which I signed up for, I applied for. My boss in the television department had also been transferred to be the area manager of this new program. So it was pretty easy for me to be accepted. And I was accepted, and these were 6-month assignments for 2 years. And where did I go? I went to Erie, Pennsylvania. Oh, I just got married too. I went to Erie, Pennsylvania.
So what year did you start the training program?
I graduated in 49.
49, okay.
I finished that first foreman's assignment. So towards the end of 49, I finished, early in 50. I finished the program as early 50. Let's lose track of time a little bit. I think it was early 50s. I finished the engineering training program.
Okay.
And I took up a job as a foreman. I stayed on that job as foreman. And then this other program came up. Now this was in 52, which is the year I got married.
Okay. And that's when you went to Erie, 52?
52 I went to Erie. And it was a 3-year program, and I went to Erie, Bloomfield, New Jersey, Pittsfield, and then to Syracuse. Went back to Syracuse. And that got me in. I was in power transformers, I was in air conditioning units, room air conditioners. Then I got back to Syracuse on the, when I was finishing up the program, I was looking for a permanent job. And a job as general foreman back in the television department that I had been in a couple years before it came up. Mm-hmm. And my boss, again, my ex-boss, was again in charge of that division. So he hired me as a general foreman on second shift. And I was in the component section. I built the yokes for TV sets.
Okay.
At second shift, night, from 3:30 to...
Did they run 3 shifts, or was it just 2 shifts?
We ran 3 shifts.
3 shifts, okay.
In the components department, they ran 3 shifts. And I stayed on that.
Were those all the GE brand TVs,
all
or were they
GE.
for other?
All GE.
Brand? Okay. It was
Only
all one in
GE
GE. Okay.
And then, as I remember, I was general foreman, and I got I'm not sure of the timing anymore, but they called me and said there was they promoted me from general foreman to quality control supervisor in the same department. And I was a quality control supervisor quality control engineer. I wasn't the supervisor, just a quality control engineer for a year or so. Had one very interesting project that came up. They were using circuit boards, and they had automatic placement machines to put parts in, and we were having a lot of trouble with the parts not going in properly and getting broken. So my job as a quality control engineer was to come up with something that would improve it. And I came up with, as I investigated it, I found out that there was a very definite correlation between the size of the hole in a printed circuit board and the size of the lead going in. Mm-hmm. And if the ratio was too tight, mm-hmm. we had problems. If they were too big, the ratio was too big, then we had soldering problems. Okay. Because after the parts went in, then I went through a soldering machine. Mm-hmm. So they were, at the same time, the department was developing a machine to put parts in automatically. But by the time I finished my study, and it improved quality hugely, mm-hmm. they didn't need the machine anymore. The machine became obsolete. Mm-hmm. So I was on that job, I forget how long now, but then an opening for quality control manager came up at the kitchen appliance division at Hot Point in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I interviewed for it, and they gave me the job. The man who had the job was leaving the company. He happened to be a good friend of mine that I'd known before. So I was quality control manager for the kitchen appliance at Hot Point for a couple of years in Cicero, Illinois. And I was there 2 years maybe, I don't remember now, when I got a call from Syracuse saying there was an opening for product service manager for GE Television. And product service was something I knew nothing about. That was part of the marketing field. This was the group that wrote the user manuals. It handled all customer complaints. It took care of everyday things related to the field. Mm-hmm. So they interviewed me. I went into Syracuse and I interviewed with the marketing manager, and I said, I forget what his name was. I said, I don't know a thing about this. You want me to be your product service manager? I don't know anything about marketing or product service at all. And he said to me, I've heard a lot about you. You've always done a good job here around the company. I'd like you to come here and be my manager. And the man I was replacing was a very good friend of mine who became a sales manager for GE in Texas. So I became the product service manager for GE Television. And this is where one of the very interesting stories of my life came up. I wasn't there very few years, and that's when this Portacolor, this GE portable project was underway. And the fellow I replaced was the coordinator. He was the project coordinator for the picture tube for the color, because they were having a lot of trouble making picture tubes for it. And before he left, he recommended that the program go ahead. Everything was ready to go. I was there 2 or 3 weeks, and the more I got into it, the more I realized they had not solved the problems. This was not the thing to move forward with. And we had a meeting. It was the general manager of the department, all the staff managers, and poor little me, who had been there like 3 or 4 weeks. And I'll never forget Bill Davidson, who was an ex-Colgate all-over football player. He was at one end of the table, and I was at the other end. And we talked about the whole thing, and I showed him some data. And finally, he said to me, well, what do you think we should do? And I said, Mr. Davidson, I've only been here a few weeks, and it's very hard to get my hands around it. And he stopped me. He said, wait a minute, Mr. Wexler. He never used to call me that. He pointed his finger at me and he said, are you the project manager on this project? I said, yes, sir. He said, just say yes or no. That's all I want to know. And I said, no, it's not ready yet. He said, that's it. Okay, we'll move forward and we'll continue our development work. And it took us about another 6 or 8 weeks before, and I really countermanded what my predecessor had said. And it was a learning lesson for me. When you run a job, that's your job. Mm-hmm. They don't care if you've been there 1 year or 1 day. And we had a very, very successful kickoff of the Portacolor set. And I'm sorry, I'll have to find out what happened.
Yeah, I hope we can see it.
It was a port. It was about a 10-inch color set.
How heavy was it?
You could pick it up.
Yeah.
I remember one of our problems that later, one man was telling me, I got a letter or phone call, he was taking it off his boat.
Okay.
Onto the dock, and the handle broke, and the set went in the water. I said, we're very sorry, we'll give you another set, which we did. One of the other things that I got involved in product service was I had customer complaint letters came in, customer calls came in, and a lady called from Buffalo, New York, into the office. And she was an elderly woman, and she said, I've been undressing in front of my television set at night, and I'm really concerned about people seeing me while I'm getting undressed. She said, what can I do? She said, I take a towel and I put it over the front of the set while I'm undressing, and they take it off when I'm got my pajamas on. So I called Jack somebody. He was in Buffalo. He was the service manager in Buffalo. I said, Jack, here's the problem. I said, best thing I can do, that we can do, I said, why don't you send up one of your very best servicemen and tell him to fiddle around with the set. Don't do anything. When he's spent 15 or 20 minutes at it, tell the lady that he changed a part and that the people can't see her anymore when she undresses. That's what we did. And about 2 weeks later, we got a very nice note from her saying how much she appreciated all this. But that was, it was the fun. It was, in a way, it was a lot of fun, but it was pretty serious as an individual that really had a problem. Mm-hmm. But we took care of her. And that was I learned a lot about marketing. I worked with a lot of good salespeople. I traveled the country a lot, out to the service operations. And then accidentally one day, the fellow that I had worked with before, that was the Syracuse graduate who'd been my general foreman when I was a foreman, he'd been my superintendent when I was a general foreman. He left GE, became president of a company in Wisconsin, an automotive parts company. And he happened to be from Syracuse. And he happened to be in town visiting. And I think he came out to the plant and I happened to see him. And he said to me, he said, I got to ask you something. He said, I've got a manufacturing manager in my factory that is not very good. And I want to replace him. What do you think about coming out and taking his job, that job? I said, no way, Jim. You know, geez, I've been with him 16 years at that time. Mm-hmm. But coincidentally, at the same time, I had interviewed, I wanted to get back into manufacturing again. I figured that was where my line of progress was, not marketing. I had interviewed for a manufacturing job in Rhode Island with GE. And they said to me, you're really the right guy for the job. But there's another fellow who's been in manufacturing, and the job was in Puerto Rico, as a matter of fact, running a plant down there. And we think he can do a better, he's probably more attuned to manufacturing right now. You've been away from it for 4 years. So I didn't get that job. And I said to myself, well, if this is the way it's going to be, that's going to be a problem for me, and other opportunities will come up. So when I talked to this friend of mine who was in Syracuse, he said, hey, I'm flying back. I was going out to the Consumer Products Show in Chicago in a couple of days at the McCormick Place. And he said, he had his own airplane. He said, I'm flying back out. Why don't you fly out with me? You don't have, I'll drop you off at Meigs Field in Chicago. I said, okay. So there we are, the two of us in this airplane, and he's talking to me about what a great company he's got, and a lot of fun, it's not too big, and et cetera, et cetera. I still like to have you come with me. And he convinced me. And that's when I left GE and went out and took over as vice president of manufacturing. And the fellow that I replaced, interestingly, was the father of, on the MASH program, what's the guy? He's an actor on MASH. Very popular, goofy kind of a guy. Not the crazy guy, but...
Not Radar.
Radar.
It is Radar. Okay.
Radar.
Okay.
Radar,
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Radar was from Wisconsin. They were from both, his father, and he grew up in Wisconsin. He grew up in Janesville. Mm-hmm. And he did some acting there and then he acted in England for a while. It was his father that I replaced.
Okay.
And I went out there, and it was really, it was reasonably well run, but not well run. And I found some things that, for example, they were running their screw machine operation 60 hours a week. And the guys they were getting the output for about a 35-hour week, mm-hmm. because they've been doing it for months and months and months and months. And there was one part of we made automobile clocks. And the movement was the same in every clock, no matter whether it's Ford or GM or Chrysler or whoever. And what they would do is they would, in order to have enough movements during the peak season, they would work the guys 60 hours a week. And I said, after some thought, and I knew a lot of the guys, I got to know a lot of the guys on the screw machine, I said, this is not the way to run that show. We're not getting 60 hours worth of work. Why don't we set up for the screw machine operation all year long to run at a level rate? Mm-hmm. So part of the year we would inventory, and part of the year we would take out of inventory. And we put them in big hoppers, and we cut screw machine back to a 40-hour week.
Okay, yeah.
which the guys hated because they were making all kind of money, but they understood.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, I got to know them quite well. The union steward was screw machine operator, and I may have told you the story that when I decided to leave Borg Instruments and go with General Instrument, he came up to me one day and he said, "Hey," he said, "all the people in the factory have gotten together, and they said that they will pay you, they will make up the difference in your salary to what you would be getting in Massachusetts if you will stay, because you're fair and you're good, and they like you." I said, I forget, Jimmy was his name, Jimmy something. I said, "Jimmy, it's a really a very nice thing to do, and I appreciate it, but it's not right for those people either." So I left. I went to General Instrument, I was vice president of manufacturing there in Massachusetts. That was a disaster. The people I worked for were not very ethical. And they made TV components too. They had a plant in Taiwan, Portugal. But my direct boss, he was a good man, but he had no people skills at all. His boss I didn't trust. And the president of the company, who was in New York, he was a good guy, but he really didn't see what was going on there. And I didn't stay there very long when I finally went back to Wisconsin to take over as business development manager, same plant that I come from.
Okay.
And I don't know what else. Oh, then I did that for a couple of years. Then I became, then my boss, the same one that I'd worked for four different times, he bought a company in Germany, auto clock company. And so he became, because he was spending a lot of time there, he needed somebody to run the U.S. operation. So I became president of that operation. And I was that for about 2 years. And then the corporation decided this European operation wasn't worth it. And they closed it down. He brought him back, he came back. There was no place for two of us. So I was surplus.
Okay.
And they helped me get another